Hello, everyone. Tonight we will relax with the story of the disease that makes monks think they turn into wolves every moonlit night. Let's start. You are standing in the middle of a dense forest in the Loire region of France, 5th-10th century. The trees rustle gently in the night, the wind whispering through the old oak branches in an ancient language that humans will never understand. In the distance, a wolf howls not alone, but a long, mournful chorus, echoing from many directions, making you shiver, even though you are wrapped in a thick sweater. The moonlight shines faintly through the night mist, casting shadows on the mossy stone roof of the Abbey of St. Laurent, the place where you have been sent to help research ancient manuscripts. But as soon as you step through the heavy wooden gates, the air feels thicker, heavier, as if an invisible layer of dust has settled over everything, and not the dust of time, but the dust of doubt. And then something was wrong. The monks here were quiet. Not the familiar, humble kind, but the kind that made your skin crawl. They avoided the moonlight. One passed you with a blank look in his eyes, as if he were somewhere else. A musty smell clung to one man's sleeve blood. Or was it just your imagination? You probably won't survive a week here if you don't understand what's really going on. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the videos and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening and what time. Now, turn off the lights, let's relax together with tonight's journey. You trudge down the stone hallway, where flickering candles cast shadows across the stained glass windows. Perhaps you imagined the faintest scratching behind the barn door. But it came 3 times, clack, dot, dot, clack, dot, dot, clack, dot, dot. The abbot greets you with a simple greeting and a cup of ginger tea. "You'll see it's a very peaceful place," he says, his eyes never leaving the table. Peaceful? Maybe, but the feeling in your neck disagrees. The first night, you sleep in a small room with a window facing the forest. Full moon, gentle breeze. Everything seems peaceful until you hear footsteps, not hurried but not normal, step by step. Then stop, then a howl, not too loud, not too close, but clear. You step outside. A figure or something is walking straight into the woods. A monk? Sure, he's wearing monk's clothes, but he moves strangely. His back is slightly hunched. His arms are unusually long. You step back. The figure disappears into the pines. The next morning you mention it lightly to another monk, and he laughs. "Sometimes we sleepwalk," he says. But his eyes blink rapidly. His wrist tightens slightly. You begin to write. There are historical accounts of collectivization of superstition in monasteries during this period. Some modern scholars refer to it as shared psychosis, where extreme beliefs lead people to actually experience hallucinations and corresponding behaviors. But are you witnessing a case of pathology or something inexplicable? A young monk named Henry began to talk to his friend more. He said that every night during the full moon, some monks would disappear from their cells. Then the next morning, their clothes would be torn, their hands covered in dirt, and their eyes. "Not human. No one believes me," Henry whispered. "But I hear the howling dot 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 inside my head." From that day on, you start listening to it again. You wake in the dark, your feet cold despite the double layer of old wool blankets. The thick stone walls don't hold much warmth, and outside, the fog is as fine as ash. But it's not the cold that makes you open your eyes in the middle of the night. It's a moan. Soft, broken, almost a swallowed sob. You tiptoe out of your room, down the dark hallway. The candlelight casts your shadow against the wall, but strangely, at times you see 2 shadows walking side by side. You turn around, no one is there. It's as if someone is walking right behind you, but always just out of sight. You stop in front of the monastery library. The door is ajar. Inside there is a rustling sound, then a scratching sound. Gentle but urgent, like claws scratching across parchment, you push the door. And you see Friar Bernard kneeling, not praying, but scratching at the wooden floor. He is not wearing a cloak. His shoulders are thin, his back is bent as if twisted in pain. You are about to say something when he turns, and in the flickering candlelight you see his eyes are red as fever. Not angry, but coldly empty. They are whispering, Bernard muttered. Under my fingernails, in my blood. You take him to his room. He doesn't resist, doesn't say anything more, just repeats one sentence. They come when the moon is full. For the next week, you watched him silently. Bernard stopped attending prayers. He ate very little and almost exclusively meat. Boiled, dried, or raw. One night you saw him holding what looked like a small bone, gnawing on it as if he had forgotten he was human. His strange condition makes you start leafing through old medical manuscripts in the library. You read about medieval body dysmorphia, when people believed they were transforming into animals. Some doctors of the time called it melancholia transformativa. But in the manuscripts, the name lycanthropus gradually appears. Bernard began to tell strange confessions in the chapel, often repeating the idea that his body was expanding. His teeth were growing. His skin was itching because the hair inside was pushing out. Others heard him say he was speaking metaphorically, but you're not so sure. Another night, you found Bernard standing before the silver mirror in the old bathroom, moonlight streaming through the small window. He whispered, "My eyes no longer reflect me." Then he scratched the mirror until blood oozed out. Medically, this phenomenon matches the symptoms of somatoform delusions, which are often noted in severe forms of anxiety disorders. But what makes you shudder is this: Bernard is not alone. Another elder, Monk Matthew, also began to hide in the shadows and avoid the moonlight. Once you caught him sniffing at a mint bush near the grave as if the scent would calm him. Mint, however, is often mentioned in the folklore of this region in rituals to ward off wild animals. A curious fact, in 14th century Central Europe, documents recorded cases of widespread lycanthropy, where entire groups of people believed they were wolves. In some places they lived in packs, ate raw wolves, and howled at each other every moonlit night. Villagers believed it was a sign of evil spirits. The church concluded that it was a sin inspired by the devil. Historians today still debate whether these phenomena were manifestations of social psychosis or the result of natural poisoning, such as grain contaminated with fungus, ergot, a powerful hallucinogen. Some even suggest that it is an ancient misinterpretation of epilepsy. But you can't forget the look in Bernard's eyes that day, when he looked at you, not afraid, not sad, but full of resignation, as if he had accepted and even waited for something to come to him. In the library, you find a loose note between 2 pages of an ancient scripture. The handwriting is hurried, as if written in fear. "If I wake up with hairy hands, please lock the door." You quietly fold the paper, and tonight you lock the door from the inside. It's still dark when you wake up, a cold sweat on your back, though there's no clear dream to explain it. Just a vague feeling of being watched. You sit up, reach to flick on the candle, and then stop your doors ajar, though you remember locking it. You step outside, barefoot on the cold stone floor. The wind blows through the hallway. A door in the distance is still swinging slightly. You walk quickly towards it and realize it is the monastery's dining room, which is usually only open during the day. You push the door open. And there was the monk Bernard sitting in the middle of the table, barehanded, head down over a tray of raw meat. No light, no fire. The meat was bright red, mixed with fat and sinew. He was chewing each bite slowly and in complete silence, without any embarrassment, as if this were an everyday occurrence. When he looked up at you, his eyes were no longer blank, they were instinctive. His tongue swept away a streak of blood that still clung to his lips. You don't scream, you don't run away. Something makes you stand still, as if hypnotized. Bernard looks at you, then says softly, like a confession, "I no longer find the bread satisfying." Then he stood up and quietly walked out of the room as if nothing had happened. You immediately returned to the library, burying your face in the old manuscripts. In a thin leather volume, you find a description from a Bavarian monastery. It was June, and the weather was hot. Monk Ismar ate raw beef heart. He said it was a way to keep the human part of himself. This is probably not the first time in history that such strange diseases have appeared in closed communities. But what is frightening is that each account suggests that raw eating behavior seems to progress in cycles. It begins with a craving for meat, then a withdrawal from others, and finally a confession, not of forgiveness, but of warning. You heard Bernard's confession that afternoon as he entered the chapel. You were not allowed to listen, but you stood outside the wooden door. "I feel every time I eat, my teeth grow longer. It doesn't hurt. It just feels right. It's just like that. And when I hear the howl, my heart clenches with joy." You shiver. You discuss this with Henry, the young monk you trust. Henry has long suspected it too. "He is not alone," Henry whispers. "Father Matthew and 2 others have confessed the same thing, but they were not punished. The abbot said it was just the shadow of winter." Another night, you and Henry decide to spy on the forest from afar with an old pair of binoculars from the conservation room. The wind blows hard. The full moon appears again, as if each part of this story is forced to repeat itself with the moon as cycle. And as expected, the 3 figures left the monastery and walked silently into the woods. They said nothing to each other. They carried no lanterns. They moved in an almost stalking manner, crouched, arms slightly out to the sides as if balancing themselves through the undergrowth. For a moment you saw clearly that Bernard was walking on all fours, a crawling posture, but so agile that you forgot he was human. "What should we do?" Henry whispered. But you had no answer. The next morning there was dried blood on the back steps of the monastery. No one mentioned it, but everyone seemed to move more lightly, whisper less, and be quieter. The entire monastery seemed to be breathing a single, held breath, waiting for a howl to burst forth. But what light? When the whole church bows before what is happening? A curious little-known fact. Many monasteries of the time placed the refectory and the chapel far apart, not only for organizational reasons, but also out of the belief that the place where souls eat and the place where souls pray should not intersect. But at St. Laurent, the 2 places were separated by only a wall. You begin to see that intersection clearly, where faith and instinct meet in the dark. And you are standing right in the middle of that boundary. The fever began to smolder like a small fire in a stone chimney. At first, just a few groans in the night, a few sunken eyes that were deeper than usual. But then, as if an invisible door had been opened, the entire monastery was suddenly filled with a state of stiffly suppressed panic. You first notice it on the day of the blood moon, a strange but not uncommon astronomical phenomenon. The red moon rises from the horizon like a beating heart. That night, the monk Matthew collapses in the middle of prayer, rolling on the stone floor, his fingernails scratching so hard that they leave long scratches. Henry and his friends helped him into the small medical room. Matthew did not have a fever, but his heart rate was alarmingly fast, and he did not open his eyes, only repeating over and over, "They are coming. They are coming, ... not tonight." And then Bernard began to howl. Not a madman's scream, but a real howl, long, steady, trembling from deep in his chest. The other monks froze. One dropped the chalice. Another clutched his rosary so tightly that the strings snapped. The abbot did not say a word. He just gestured for everyone to return to their rooms. You and Henry managed to open the basement archives. which hold unofficial manuscripts, mostly notes that were culled from the main library because they did not conform to the standard beliefs. There you find a dark old parchment with the following title of the Volf soul, about the Volf spirit. The contents are a compilation of recorded cases from the 11th to 14th centuries where individuals, particularly monks, believed their souls left their bodies to live as a Volf every full moon. In one passage, it is not the fur that grows, but the human will that withdraws. The Volf does not take possession of the body. The man opens the door for it. You sigh, wondering, is this just a literary metaphor? Or did the ancients actually witness something similar to what you're seeing? Henry believed in the science. He spoke of the possibility of community hysteria, a disorder caused by social pressure in a closed environment like the Strasbourg Women's riots or the schoolchildren's mass screaming in 19th century France. But you couldn't shake the feeling that there was something going on beyond mere psychiatry. The next night, howls echoed through the monastery like a chorus. Not just Bernard, not just Matthew. You counted at least your different voices. All of them ring out, wave after wave, like a call from the jungle. Each howl long interwoven like a language your body understands, but your mind refuses to translate. The monks stopped chanting aloud. They mumbled. They scratched at their robes. One fasted for 3 days and then swallowed a live bird that Henry had found in the churchyard. In desperation, you suggest writing to the bishops of Tours. The abbot is silent for a long time, then finally nods, not because he believes, but because he gives up. 2 weeks later, a group of 3 priests and a physician arrived. They brought incense, prayer books, and looks of disbelief and fear. As you recounted the events, a young priest asked, "Are you sure this isn't a play?" You looked him straight in the eye. No one pretends to eat raw meat at night. The exorcism was held in the chapel. They used holy water, peppermint candles, and they read from the Indian book, but when they began to read the passage about salvation, Bernard laughed, not fiercely, not loudly, but lightly as the wind blowing across a dry field. And then he howled, a long howl that made the young priest drop his cross. At that moment you realize there are diseases that cannot be cured by the Bible, not because they have no medicine, but because they didn't want to be cured. Strange fact? Some scholars now believe that communal lycanthropy often occurs in communities that are under prolonged stress like famine, disease, or religious pressure. St. Laurent Abbey had just endured a winter of food shortages, and many ecclesiastical reforms had been imposed from above. The atmosphere was gloomy and fearful. But what about the howl? And that look? Historians still debate whether the St. Laurent phenomenon is a psychological reaction, a somatic disorder, or an ancient ritual behavior that has persisted through generations disguised as a religious one. And you, that night, when the howling echoed throughout the monastery, you sat huddled by the window, the moon shining in your eyes. And for the first time, you understand that calling. Not by reason, but by something more primal, deeper. You don't answer it. But next time you'll want to. You wake up in the middle of the night to a very strange sound. Not a howl this time, but a gentle scratching from underneath the wooden floor. It's steady, almost rhythmic, as if someone or something is carving a message that only you can hear. You pull out a chair and crouch down to look at the floor. There's nothing there, but the smell, there's something strange about it, like damp earth mixed with burnt grease. It reminds you of the burnt stew Henry used to make, except this smell more vivid. You hear a scratching sound from behind you, from inside the chapel. No one is allowed in after prayer. But the scratching is long and slow, like someone is scratching lines of scripture into the wall with their fingernails. You go that way. The chapel door is unlocked. Inside, Bernard stood alone before the altar. His hair was long, tangled, and sticky with sweat, but his back was straight, his eyes bright. He turned, and for the first time since his illness began, he smiled. "Finally, I understand," he said. "This is not a disease. This is deliverance. You do not answer." He stepped closer, as gently as a father would caress a child. "I know you heard them. That call. The warmth of the moon touching your bones. The relief of not being human anymore. No worries, no regrets, no memories." You tremble. "I don't want to. I've wanted to since the first night I saw you scratching the floor. I just haven't dared to accept it." You step back, but your hand tightens around the mint. Its pungent scent makes you feel alive, not instinct. Memories, sunny mornings, Henry's laugh, the smell of burnt toast. You shout, "I am still human." Bernard stopped, looked at you for a long moment, then nodded, sadly. "Then I will be lonely." You turn and run from the chapel, not looking back. You rush into the library, light the fire with all the mint, let the scent fill it. You wrap yourself in a blanket, open the window, let the moonlight in, challenge it, and y'all sleep, really sleep. Don't dream of running, don't listen, no hair seen, just asleep. The next morning, the monastery was empty. Henry, Bernard, Matthew, all gone. No trace, no blood, no belongings. Just a clean absence, as if they had never existed. You don't know where they went. But you stay. Still human. And still dreaming, not the dream of running on all fours, but the dream of sunshine, bells, and the scent of mint in the wind. Winter came earlier than usual. The cold seeped into the crevices of the monastery, into your pillows, into your cloak, into your spine. You were left alone within the old stone walls where prayers, footsteps, bells, and howls once filled the air. The abbey is no longer a living place. It is an empty shell, an architectural skeleton that holds a soul long gone. You walk through the corridors every day as if you are walking through memories. Each wall reminds you of Bernard sitting in meditation, Henry drawing in secret, Matthew moaning in the night. The monks' robes still hang neatly in the rooms. No one has tidied them up. No one dares. A week after the last night, you receive a letter. No name on the sender. Just a small piece of paper written in hasty handwriting. If you remember that you are human, you have won. But never forget, that is also a burden, nothing else. No address, no stamp, but you know who wrote it. You continue to live in the monastery as a solitary librarian. You tend the library, writing down what happened. Not for history's sake, but for your own. Need to tell, need to remember. Because you begin to understand, when no one tells it, the truth becomes legend, and legends are always repeated. Another night, while you're cleaning out an old archive, you discover a manuscript hidden in the wall. No name, no date, just this. About the one who stays. The story is about a survivor of a divine aberration in a self-destructing community. He becomes nothing. He stays, records, guards, and hear the howl in the wind every night. At the end of the manuscript is a single line written in a completely different handwriting. Not everyone is chosen to be. Some are chosen to be witness. You close the manuscript. Say nothing. Don't sigh. Because now you know your role. Every month, on the night of the full moon, you sit on the porch, holding a bunch of mint, placing a small book on your pillow, letting the moonlight shine down on the blank page. You don't expect anything to happen, but you wait, because waiting is also a part of memory, and memory is the final residence of what humans call the soul. When the wind whistles through the hallways, sometimes you hear a distant howl, not loud, not clear, but enough to make you shiver, then laugh, a soft laugh, as if you were living with ghosts. But ghosts you knew by name. You are not afraid anymore. Because in the end, the scariest thing is not turning into a Wolf. It's not remembering that you were ever human. And you still remember. Thank you for going through the story with me tonight. Wishing you a deep, peaceful sleep with no howling in the wind, just dreams as gentle as dew. Good night.